Namaste and welcome everyone. We're going to be going into chapter 3 of the invitation now. It's entitled, May We Join You? You know, Christo, says Penelope as she and Christo walk arm in arm toward the next destination. I don't recall having a cocktail or munching on any of those delectable hors d'oeuvres. Yet I'm feeling quite satiated. Isn't that what happens routinely when one is engaged in spiritual nourishment? All the rest, including the concept of time, cease to exist, with eternity having replaced them with the truth of simply being. Being in the moment, that is. Ah, yes. Thanks for the reminder, says Penelope. Now, having arrived at a table for four, Christo, being the consummate gentleman, greets the two awaiting them. Good evening. May we join you? Of course you may. We've been waiting for you to arrive. This is Maya Angelou, a dear, lifelong friend, and I am Kahlil Gibran. And you are Christo and Penelope, is that right? Yes, that's correct, and namaste, answers Penelope, still somewhat nonplussed by what appears to be an all-knowing atmosphere. But how? We simply know because we know, says Kahlil, with Maya affirming by her graceful smile. Well, all right then, she returns. We now see what we really know. I have long admired both of you and have been inspired by the richness of your life's work. Flattery will get you everywhere, returns Kahlil with a twinkle in his eye. But then you already are there, everywhere that is. Maya and I were just discussing that very topic. And exactly what is that, asked Christo. The awareness of being everywhere and in everything, Maya answers. But if we may, we'd like to follow up on an element or two of your earlier discussion, the one you had with Rumi and Hafiz. And just what parts are those, asked Penelope respectfully. Well, Kahlil says, for starters, let's begin with the divine idea of love. You and they have said that love is our only journey and implied the only end, all in one. Although you have focused more on God's law of first cause and other conversations before this one tonight, this is what you really are speaking of, is it not? Once again, Penelope is a bit shaken by the reference to an event or happenings that took place before this evening had begun. As she looks at Christo, however, she is reminded that truth is eternal, and she immediately lets go of all reference to time. As she re-enters eternity, the fear of being trapped in time is wrapped safely in the peace truth has brought to her midst. Oh yes, what you're referring to is all those discussions we've had about discerning the distinction between truth and illusion, and that truth can only produce what it is, and thus, on its inseparable effect, truth itself. And that when we operate from the view of life that blames or judges life as the appearance of effect rather than truth itself, we are led astray from the way of truth. Yes, that's it entirely, affirms Maya, and this plays out in life from the view that we are humans all too often make a judgment that it's appearance that dictates truth. For example, as a person of color, and as a woman, at least for some people, these designations render us as unequal. In the eyes of mortal judgment, that is so, Christo reinforces, but as you know so well, in the eyes of our spiritual reference, we are as one only, and in that oneness our atonement is earned. Equality is given. In fact, equality is truth, while difference is the illusion. We here know that, but how many others do, Maya contends. If I were to speak to you as an unbeliever, I would say something like this to you. You declare to see me dimly through a glass which will not shine, thus seeing me through a glass darkly, though I stand before you boldly, trim in rank and making time. You do own to hear me faintly as a whisper out of range, while my drums beat of the message and the rhythms never change. Equality, and I will be free. I see these elements of separation still, even though we claim in this country to be equal in every way. Equality is not here, not by a long shot, agrees Penelope. Yet even faint acknowledgement is the beginning, is it not? Yes, it's the beginning, but only that, Maya affirms. Again, if I were to wax more eloquence, I would continue thus. You announce my ways are wanton, that I fly from man to man. But if I'm just a shadow to you, could you ever understand? We have lived a painful history. We know the shameful past. But I keep on marching forward, and you keep on coming last. You see, dear ones, although it's true that the view of me differs from man to man, if the one I stand before me is colored by our past, no pun intended, then no matter how far I've come in my own view of me, he still does not see the truth I see. But on some level he is touched by the drum you beat, the path which lights even his way, Penelope observes. Ah, that's true, my dear. Yet, as I ask him to take off his blinders and the padding off his ears, even if he hears me crying and sees my hurting tears, will he hear the tempo that is so compelling and respect the very blood that flows through my veins? Will he finally follow the drum of equality to which we march as one? That is the question, it seems to me. My answer to that would be as I have stated earlier, Christo begins, and that is on some level it would be so. Some of us want to erase history in a flash, and if we simply reconnect with the truth of eternal being, then what has seemed like centuries of blindness, pardon me for that sneeze, then what has seemed like centuries of blindness is only a blink of the eternal eye. It seems to me that what makes this so is the understanding that you have of love as the way. Truth cannot be activated otherwise. True, love is the way, Kahlil agrees, although most do not know what love really is, let alone can demonstrate its power to heal. For example, when you love, you would not say, God is in my heart, but rather, I am in the heart of God. And you think you can direct the course of love, for love, if it finds you worthy, directs your course. Love has no other desire but to fulfill itself. But if you love and must needs have desires, let those be your desires to melt and be like a running brook that sings a melody in the night. To know the pain of too much tenderness, to be wounded by your own understanding of love and to bleed willingly and joyfully, to wake at dawn with a winged heart and give thanks for another day of loving, to rest at noon hour and mediate love's ecstasy, to return home at eventide with gratitude, and then to sleep with a prayer for the beloved of your heart and a song of praise upon your lips. And so you see, love gives naught but itself, takes naught but from itself. Love possesses not, nor would it be possessed, for love is sufficient unto love. Oh, dear Kahlil, if only the world would see this as truth for them, instead of hiding behind the fear of such, Maya says, the pain of historical rejection piercing the air. If only they would see this. I feel that humanity has jailed themselves in the realm of fear, particularly now in this era of war going throughout the world. When fear reigns in a very real sense, that is a jail into which we have placed ourselves. And when in that self-imposed jail, truth is the last thing we see when engaging life. Illusion that fear represents is the glass through which we then see darkly. Connecting with the mood of the moment, Christo adds, imprisoning ourselves in the realm of fear sure is a killer. One could call it suicide or even self-crucifixion, depending on the precise nature of it. I suppose, what just came to mind is an expression my father used to say to me in a somewhat related circumstance. He wasn't well educated, but hugely wise nevertheless. Whenever someone would project his or her anger or demeaning nature onto my family or me, the very illusion that would have impressed this person in his house of fear, Dad would say, just consider the source and rise above it. For most of my younger years, I took that to mean I should rise above the person who said it. But as the sage in me took over, I came to understand that my father was not speaking about the individual at all. He was speaking about rising above whatever thought form the person had imprisoned himself with, so that I could then see life largely through the looking glass of truth. As Crystal searches for a precise conclusion he wants to draw from such wisdom, he is suddenly aware of Waldo's presence at the table with the four of them. Then he gathers his wits and finishes. This reminds me of the story of Jesus walking on water, signifying that he was of this world, but not in it. He chose to rise above ego consciousness as an example of the way that life is to be lived in a world of spirit, and said, "Oh, what a wonderful example of transcendence, leaping over the illusion back into the lap of truth," Waldo exclaims. Isn't this the way of truth and life of which the Master Jesus spoke? Throughout his teachings, did he not insist that it is not undoing the past that frees us from the past? It is only by remembering with our awareness of truth and activating that in our lives that we are set free from living illusion. In reality, it's not simply the awareness of truth that does the trick. It's activating it as the way that enlivens the spirit, which brings us life as the expression of the kingdom. It is this activation of truth that sets us free from the potential of activating illusion. Thus we transcend illusion, for the truth life is in all its perfection. The fullness of life then rests in the faith we put into truth, and then individuating truth as only each of us uniquely can. Where did Waldo come from? Crystal thinks to himself. And then in a flash, the answer comes to the fore. He never left, just as none of us ever leave. The only thing that leaves is the embodiment of the illusion that informs physical being. Waldo's spirit speaks to us continuously, just as all of us do for one another throughout eternity. God lends us to one another that way, as the inimitable Wordsworth has told us. Still, Christo was shaken a bit by Waldo's response to his thought. You're absolutely correct, Christo. None of us really leaves, for our home is always our place of residence. You see, in human form, we have the temerity to think that we must do certain things, and perfectly, before we feel good enough to see God once again. Such a view needs transcendence, for we already are at home, as God personified. We just don't remember that we are that, and in this forgetfulness we fall back in our ego consciousness for justification. Just what does this justification do? The illusion imposed by ego consciousness is to set us in the cement of its existence, so ego will be at least equal, if not superior, to God in our beliefs. This is why we make God our size instead of as big as all outdoors. If I may even use that minuscule metaphor to explain the omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniactive God of ours, which we also are. Actually, it is vain of us to think otherwise, that we could create a life separate from what we really are. And do I make myself clear? Quite so, claims Penelope, but not unlike Christo, she is still unaccustomed to truth showing up so readily, just as it is needed, just as the learner is ready for it. This is precisely what we wanted those we're working with to understand. As far as we can tell, they are taking to this way as the truth that brings life into full swing. Yes, quite so, Penelope, and you too, Christo. We all are proud as can be to see you not only teaching this way, but even more important, that you are teaching primarily by the only way real learning occurs, through example. Maya begins laughing at the apparent incongruity of life and the hereafter when juxtaposed with what man has made it out to be. To answer your wonderment over what I'm laughing at, she begins, there's a poem that came through me some time ago. It's about dealing with death by begging to a preacher. And it goes like this. Preacher, don't send me when I die some big ghetto in the sky where rats eat rats of the leopard type and Sunday brunch is grits and tripe. I've known those rats. I've seen them kill, and grits I've had would make a hill or maybe a mountain. So what I need from you on Sunday is a different creed. Preacher, please don't promise me streets of gold and milk for free. I stopped all milk at 4 years old, and once I'm dead, I don't need gold. At this point, she breaks out in a broad smile, and the others join her in kind, so great is her pleasure in her recital of truth. I'd call a place pure paradise, where families are loyal and strangers nice, where the music is jazz and the season is fall. Promise that or nothing at all. There you have it, my piece on transcendence, Maya says, with deep, rolling laughter, all in joy. You have listened well, dear Maya, announces Waldo. Very well indeed. And just as suddenly as he had appeared, Waldo disappears from view. Must be we're past the transcendent stage, Crystal says to himself. No, he hears it said from within, we're just giving it a rest. And Crystal laughs out loud, so hard inside that it almost spills over onto the table. We all got it, Crystal, Kahlil says with a laugh that outdoes Crystal's. We all got it. Nods from the rest to affirm the accuracy of Kahlil's observation. And where were we when we were so timely interrupted? Asked Maya. I think we were somewhere between activating love and transcending illusion, answers Penelope. Not that I don't want to continue in this vein, because I do. Yet Maya's lovely rendering of prayer intent reminds me of the way we have dealt with prayer. As you obviously know by now, we are handling the application of prayer not as a supplication, asking a God separate from us to give us something we erroneously think we already don't have or feel powerless to manifest ourselves, but rather as listening to inner authority, pure consciousness for the truth which we then activate as our being. Kahlil and Maya nod in acknowledgement of such wisdom, while Crystal holds the spaciousness for even more to follow. In this way, we have come to understand that we as God personified are really only listening to our real self, divine order waiting to become aware and then to be activated. In this way, we are self-fulfilling prophecies in the making. It seems to me that the meaning we have come to, in and of itself, is what transcendence has unveiled. Do you see it the same way? Penelope asked Kahlil and Maya. I see it precisely that way, only it would use different imagery to convey what you just have. Kahlil responds first. If I couch a meaning in that which you have posed, Penelope, and then apply my poetic sensibility to it, although your sensibility to truth is no less poetic, only phrased so that others can learn from it what they cannot from mine, then I would speak to someone like this. I cannot teach you how to pray in words. God listens not to your words, save when he himself utters them through your lips. And I cannot teach you the prayer of the seas and of the forests and the mountains. But you who are born in the mountains and forests and seas can find their prayer in your heart. And if you but listen in the stillness of the night, you shall hear them in silence. Our God, who art our winged self, it is thy will in us that willeth. So you see, truth comes out of oneness, and not from supplications to what is erroneously thought to be a separate, no matter how great that separate entity may be. In this way, in a way, this too is transcendence, Maya proclaims, for the good of all. As I see it, life is nothing but transcending our mistaken focus on the effect, so that the first cause can be seen for what it is, and then obeyed without fail. This is perfection of a loving kind. As I reflect on this moving conversation, I am somehow drawn to ask about death, that is, your views about death. Christo suggests to the group, I know what we have said about it, but we don't know how you treat it. Silence reigns. Time is pregnant with pause. Still more passes without response. Seemingly life and death has passed them by. Then this. Oh, really? Says Kahlil. Just a little while ago I saw such understanding take root in your foundation. Was that an erroneous observation on my part, or did you simply forget? I'm sorry, Kahlil, but I'm missing your point, Christo rejoins. No, you're not, suggests Penelope. Just return to the awareness as what is really happening here. Again, pause reigns, but not for long this time. Oh, goodness, of course, Christo exclaims. We've been listening to the offerings of the universe and translating them into our work and with others, haven't we? Yes, of course, that's it. Well, okay, then, so we know, generally at least, what meaning death has for you. But each of you has your own unique way of saying it. What has come through us is truth personified no less, but still differently expressed as only each of us can. This is truth, Christo, so we'll let you off the hook this time, but only because you finally allowed yourself to express your genius, what you too are in all of your Christhood. I have asked this many times and I have answered thus, although I wouldn't burden you with the entirety of it. What I have to say will serve to remind you of what has come through you, the very same, as truth prophesied. You would know the secret of death, but how shall you find it unless you seek it in the heart of life? The owl whose night-bound eyes are blind unto day cannot unveil a mystery of light. If you would indeed behold the spirit of death, open your heart wide into the body of life, for life and death are one, even as the river and sea are one. Get the point? This is as we have conveyed it, asserts Penelope. Defining the meaning of death, one must look in the truth of life, where death does not exist. Truthfully, then, we cannot find the meaning of death in ignorance, but only from enlightenment, which then allows us to transcend the figment of death, returning to the eternal life we know to be the truth. After all, if we can't see truth as all there is, how can we dispel death found in ignorance or darkness, which, metaphorically at least, is death itself? That's really lovely, Penelope, says Kahlil, with Maya nodding in unison. Lovely, lovely, simply lovely. Why, thank you. It's an honor to serve. Maya, I seem to recall one of your scintillating verses dealing with death. Would you share that with us? I'd be honored to, Penelope, if you mean the one titled Still I Rise. As you know so well, this speaks to death of a different kind. So I want to know if this is the one of which you speak. That's precisely the one I mean. And I want you to share it with us because it makes the point that most of us miss when we speak about death. Please do share this one with us. All right then, Maya seems to be saying in her demeanor and approach. If that's what you want, darling, that's what you're going to get. Here it goes, she says as she stands before the table in all her divine stature, speaking as if to royalty. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. just like moons and the suns with the certainty of the tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Do you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Do you take it awful hard 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard? You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the husk of history's name I rise. Upon the past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of a slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. They're properly irreverent. They're properly irreverent. There it is. Bravo, bravo, Penelope punctuates the completion of Maya's eloquent portrayal of death. And what more do we need learn about death of those illusions we think we need to fulfill in order to be reborn in truth? Indeed, this speaks so clearly to the kind of death that is victory, so we can be born yet again in truth. Such rebirth can be spoken of as transcendence. It also speaks with truth about the meaning we have failed to give to resurrection, the rising into the ultimate transcendent form that is birthed through the hands of the midwife we call enlightenment. What a wonderful metaphorical meaning that is, Penelope finishes. This very way of viewing life is the underlying foundation for our teaching of resurrection and reincarnation, Christo asserts, which we have linked, if not rendered synonymous. As you know, reincarnation is thought by many, if not most, as that which occurs when we return after death to physical life once again. Metaphysically, we can come to the meaning of resurrection and reincarnation simply as being born yet again with new, more spiritual perceptions of what life eternally brings us. Thus we reincarnate and resurrect in mind endless times daily. We don't have to wait for another physical reconfiguration to occur. All we need do is to be aware of truth as it regularly comes to us as consciousness. But then you both already know that. Anyhow, Maya, I strongly echo Penelope's comment and sentiment and applaud you for rendering truth so beautifully. Thank you for pairing this humble poetic presence with such richness of spiritual character, you two. Maya responds, equally humble. Such is the richness of beauty at its best. Pardon me. Pardon me. Don't you agree, Kahlil? Up until now, adds Penelope, not giving Kahlil any opportunity to affirm or decline, my favorite edition of beauty comes from the piece God's Pocket Dictionary, in which beauty is defined as God sees it. And that is this: beauty is that which frees itself from the hearts of those who open themselves to my ways, meaning God's ways, of course. I do agree, both about Maya's penetrating poem and that delicious definition. They are lovely, simply lovely. Kahlil pauses to reflect, then says, if you will permit, I'd like the privilege and honor to share with you this passage that speaks to each of you and all that is. It's one of my favorites. By all means, responds Crystal, joining Penelope in loving intention. I have a hunch that Waldo will be here momentarily, so let him enjoy it with us. There could be no other way, Crystal, says Waldo as he suddenly appears, pulling up a chair and beckoning Kahlil to stand in truth before them. This is getting to be fun, Penelope and Crystal say of Waldo's sudden appearances, yet in supposed silence. Waldo looks at them with smiling eyes, acknowledging their own enjoyment of meeting unveiled this way. Now then, here it is. I ask that you hear it as the truth of your being and nothing but. As Kahlil stands tall and strong, opening his voice to that which speaks only to what each is. Where shall you seek beauty? And how shall you find her unless she herself be your way and your guide? And how shall you speak of her except she be the weaver of your speech? The aggrieved and the injured say beauty is kind and gentle. Pardon me. Like the young mother, half shy of her own glory, she walks among us. And the passionate say, nay, beauty is a thing of might and dread. Like the tempest, she shakes the earth beneath us and the sky above us. The tired and weary say, beauty is of soft whisperings. She speaks to our spirit. Her voice yields to our silences like a faint light that quivers in fear of the shadow. But the restless say, we have heard her shouting among the mountains, and with her cries came the sound of hoofs and beating of wings and the roaring of lions. At night the watchmen of the city say, beauty shall rise with the dawn from the east. And at noontide the toilers and wayfarers say, we have seen her leaning over the earth from the windows of the sunset. In winter, say the snowbound, she shall come with the spring leaping on the hills. And in the summer heat the reapers say, we have seen her dancing with the autumn leaves, and we saw a drift of snow in her hair. All these things you say of beauty, yet in truth you spoke not of her, but of needs unsatisfied. And beauty is not a need, but an ecstasy. It is not a mouth thirsty, nor an empty hand stretched forth, but rather a heart inflamed and a soul enchanted. It is not the image you see though you close your eyes, and the song you hear though you shut your ears. It is not the sap which the furrowed bark, nor a wing attached to a claw, but rather a garden forever in bloom, and a flock of angels forever in flight. People of Orphalese, beauty is life when life unveils her holy face. But you are life, and you are the veil. Beauty is eternity gazing at itself in a mirror. But you are eternity, and you are the mirror. Tears stream down cheeks in celebration of beauty defined. Having stripped the surface understanding, so truth can be seen and heard. Metaphor rules once again as only metaphor can. Come, Waldo beckons Christo and Penelope, it is time for the next course. You've dealt with transcendence on many levels, and I'm proud of you. Neither of you has let a single morsel drop to the floor. That is all part of your intrinsic beauty, he says. He guides them to the next table, with Penelope on his arm and Christo close behind. You know, Penelope, beauty without expression is boring, and though we travel the world over to find the beautiful, we must carry it with us, or we find it not. You sound just like Christo when I tell him I found beauty in another. You couldn't see it in another if it weren't already within you, he'd say. Right he is, returns Waldo. That's exactly what I meant by what I just said. This time, Christo and Penelope turn to their first course partners before they have escaped them. Thank you, Kahlil and Maya, they say with utmost sincerity. This has been a most inspirational time with you. Only their mouths have not opened to express their intention. You're entirely welcome. The pleasure is all ours, they hear in return. The glow of inner meaning rests with them in a more permanent form now, as their compatriots suddenly disappear from view, not unlike the fog on a brilliant sunlit morning. Teachers come and teachers go, but only as we're ready for them do they appear. So, there we are with Chapter 3. We'll go on with Chapter 4 in the next reading. I look forward to being with you then. As you know, I like to end with a post that I found that speaks to me. I hope it will also speak to you, especially this one. Pardon me. Once Picasso was asked what his paintings meant, and he said, do you ever know what the birds are singing? You don't. but you listen to them anyway. So sometimes with art, it's just as important to just look. So, my dear friends, just look, be aware of the life around you and the life that you are within you. I hope you have a wonderful week. Stay well, be happy. Namaste. I love you.